Hi everyone, I'm Marcy, and today's episode is all about Hatch green chili. Everything from how to tell the difference between hot and mild, to different ways to roast and peel it, to freezing it so you can enjoy it year-round. Now, I don't claim to be an expert, but I did grow up on Hatch chili, and I've been eating and cooking with it my whole life, so I thought I'd share what I know. First thing you should know is Hatch isn't a variety of chili. It's where the chili is grown, in Hatch, New Mexico. So if you were to take the seeds from these chilies and try growing them somewhere else, you can no longer call it Hatch chili. There's just something very special about this specific southwestern region in New Mexico. And you combine that with just the right climate, where it's sunny and hot during the day, but cooler in the evenings, and it makes for growing the most incredibly flavorful chili that's known and loved all over the world. Now, there are different varieties of Hatch chili. The more common ones you'll hear about are Big Jim and Sandia. Sandia being the hotter one, but there's also lumbre, which in Spanish means fire, so that should tell you something. It is extra hot, but regardless of which variety, it will always be labeled hot, medium, or mild, so you should be able to find your Hatch chili just the way you like it. Now, as a rule of thumb, the smaller and thinner your chili is, like say this one here, and this one, it'll be hotter, as opposed to something like this that's bigger and wider. This will be mild. Also, the point tells you something. When it's like this, sort of like a bell pepper, that's gonna be more mild. So let's say it's a month of August or September when Hatch chili is in season and you've gone out and bought some fresh Hatch chili. A lot of times you can have it roasted on the spot in giant gas cylinders, and that's always a time saver and so wonderful when they offer that service. But if you're roasting at home, you can do it any number of ways. I mostly roast it on a comal, which is a heavy iron skillet. If you have a gas stove, you can roast it directly on the flame. You can roast them in your oven. You just place the chili on the top rack and set your oven to broil. Then be sure to use tongs to flip them over so that they're roasted on all sides. You can also roast them on your outdoor grill, which is what I'm going to do with the majority of these, but I'm going to reserve a few to show you something later. But basically what you want is for the skin to char and blister so that it separates from the flesh of the meat. And you'll hear all sorts of crackling and popping as that happens. Some of these chilies are already done. So once they're fully roasted, the most common way to peel them is to first put them in a plastic bag and seal them tightly and let them steam for about 15 minutes, and that'll loosen the skins and make it easier to peel. Depending on the shape of the chili, sometimes it's a little trickier, so you can just kind of use your tongs to kind of move it around and help it char on whatever side is missing. Like this one here, you can see where it's not charring on this side, so you can kind of try to help it along by just holding it in place like that. Go ahead and put it in the bag, seal it up, and let it steam. And now we can peel. To play it safe, I'm wearing gloves, although these ones fit me a little big, but they're better than nothing. And you don't have to wear gloves. It's just a matter of, if you're peeling a lot, I would recommend it because the chili does rub off on your skin and it tends to burn, especially if the chili is hot. If you're only doing a few and your chili's mild, then there's probably no need. But let's go ahead and see how easily this comes off. And you can see it just slides right off beautifully. Sometimes it's not always easy, so you might need to use a knife if the skin is just stuck on there and just kind of force it to come off. You just never know. Some are easy and some are not. Now, a lot of times what I do when I'm roasting just a small amount of chilies is I take them straight off the comal and quickly drop them into some ice water. Now, a lot of people will frown on this method because I'm putting them in water. And I would too if I was leaving them in there for a long time. But what I'm doing by putting them in the ice water is I'm immediately stopping the cooking process so that it doesn't continue to cook. And when I do that, what happens is the chili stays green instead of turning brown. And I'll show you when I'm done here. Now that the chilies are peeled, I thought I'd do a side-by-side comparison. These are the chilies that were steamed for 15 minutes, and these are the chilies that were quickly dipped in the ice water. And you can see kind of a noticeable difference in the color. The ones that went into the ice bath are definitely a brighter green, whereas these ones have turned more yellow. And they're also a little more flimsy than these that seem to be a little hardier. But what a lot of people will say is that when you put chili in water, that it washes away the flavor. And I'm telling you, they taste exactly the same. In fact, I can give a little taste to some of these just to have a little comparison. Gotta have a little salt. That's good. Oh, it's hot. Now let me try this one. Kind of wish I had some beans and a tortilla right now. They're both fantastic. Well, either way will work. If you want the easiest way, I would say steaming them first because they peel off real easily afterwards. But if you are very particular and you care about the color and the structure, then maybe the other route is the way to go. What can I say? I'm a chili snob and I notice these things. I will tell you what we will never do again, and that is last year when we went to Hatch to get our yearly supply of chili, we noticed that a lot of the businesses were offering to peel the chili there on the spot in those same drums. After they're done spinning and roasting them, they used water to shoot into those drums, and sort of like a power wash, they took the skins off of the chili. And this was just for an additional fee. And so we thought, boy, this is definitely worth it because it's gonna save me tons of time and I won't have to peel. But when I got home, I did notice there was a substantial difference in the chili. Most of the stems had been broken off. In fact, I wasn't able to make a single chile relleno, which is a big deal for us. And just the consistency, they were like very flimsy. And as far as the flavor is concerned, they were still flavorful, but maybe just not as much as usual. So something to keep in mind. I think that if you have that done, there's nothing against that and it definitely saves time. but it does change the consistency. I think that water pressure is just a little too high and it compromises the integrity of the chili. Now let's talk freezing. I only use small quart-size bags, and I just put enough chili in there to make 1 or 2 meals at the most. You never want to use a really big Ziploc bag, because then when you pull it out of the freezer and thaw it out, you end up having to put the remainder back in the freezer again. So just small portions in the bags. And then here's a pro tip from my mom. Make sure that you take a towel and dry off any bit of moisture in your bag before you put it in the freezer, because that moisture will become ice, and if you've got your bags stacked on top of each other, they will stick together. Some people actually freeze their chili with the peelings on them, which I've never really understood, because you're still going to have to peel them when they come out, and having the peelings on them is just going to take up more room in the freezer. Another thing too is that the stems take up room in the freezer, so I cut off the stems when I put them in my bags, but I will save a few. Like, I'll look and I'll find really good ones that I know will make a fantastic chile relleno, like this one, and I'll set it aside. And I'll set aside all the good ones with stems, and I'll have 1 or 2 bags just with chilies with stems, but all the rest I remove the stems to save room in the freezer. When I know I'm going to make something with chili, I'll pull a bag out of my freezer and just place it in my sink to thaw for a few hours. So you just kind of have to know ahead of time if you're going to do it that way. Or if you need it right away, you can also just thaw it in the microwave. Now, when I do cook with it, I don't always use it all, so I might have a couple of chilies left over. And so what I'll do with those extra chilies is I'll just dice them up and I'll put them in a jar and keep it in my refrigerator. And you'd be surprised how quickly it will get used up. You'll get up in the morning, you'll be scrambling some eggs, and you'll think, hey, why not scoop out some of this chili and just mix it in there, and it's just a better breakfast. Or you'll be eating a sandwich and you go to get some condiments and you see that and you're like, hey, let me just throw this on top of my sandwich. So it's just a really great way to use those extra chilies. Just dice them up and keep them in a jar. Well, I think that pretty much covers the basics of Hatch Chili. Next week, my husband and I will be making our annual pilgrimage to Hatch to pick up our yearly supply of chili. So I figured this was a perfect time to share this information with you. If you found it helpful, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if you love Hatch Chili as much as I do. I also ask you to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and you're also invited to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Marcy Inspired. Until next time, blessings from my kitchen to yours.